Welcome back to the Christian Guys. I'm Bobby Allison.
I'm Mateo.
Thanks for joining us again. We're going to talk about some Christian topics today, most notably how we deal with the Bible verses pertaining to loving thy neighbor. We're a podcast about our Christian faith, and we want to geek out about Christian topics. So let's get started.
The Christian Guys, seeking to provide a platform where listeners can geek out about the Word and the many topics facing Christ followers today.
Today we're discussing the concepts surrounding and the I guess the confounds or some of the arguments for and against. Is it for and against, or is it more so the caveats surrounding loving thy neighbor? There's a little bit of controversy in some church circles about how far that should go. Does that mean you invite everybody into your house, whether or not they're, habitual IV drug users and dangers to your children, or if you are allowed to have certain boundaries with your neighbors, but still love them from a distance, so I guess we'll start with, what are some of the pertinent scriptures surrounding loving thy neighbor? I guess what's the theological perspective on it?
I would say for pertinent scriptures, just the most well-known scripture or verse is just obviously love your neighbor as yourself. But then when they asked Jesus what is the most important commandment, Jesus said that the great commandment, or the greatest commandment, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is which is like the first, is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, that might not be the most perfect wording of an exact translation, but that's the gist of it. So in Jesus's answer to the greatest commandment, obviously, number one, it's love God with everything in you, but a second, which is basically conjoined with the first, is to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you're loving God with everything in you, part of that is going to be to love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
So it's given to us as the greatest commandment, with pretty much net neutrality, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Okay. So it's a very important concept to take in and to project, or I guess to turn into behavior. So I guess I've been talking, just preparing for the podcast and talking to a couple of fellow Christians. Some people get a little bit confused as to what that means. Do they involve themselves with lots of different people, or is it okay to keep yourself? So do you try to help as much as you can? Do you try to love when you know someone could be a danger to you? I think that's some of the times, for instance, we have some people that live in and around our neighborhood that we really care about, but we know that they would be, and we know that they could perhaps, come and join us for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner and stuff like that. That we're interested in having them come and have some fellowship with us. But then again, we're not necessarily certain as to whether they're safe around our kids, whether they're, whether they're safe around us, whether they would take advantage of our kindness, those types of things.
Yeah, we still have to operate with wisdom. We can't just throw wisdom out the door. We're told in the Bible to be as gentle as lambs, but as wise as serpents. We are still supposed to operate with wisdom, but we love as much as we can and treat others like ourselves as much as we can, while operating within that wisdom. And we still have to, take care of ourselves and our family first. That's a high priority. So you would not just open your front door to anyone, or just leave it unlocked in case someone who needs help might be wandering through the neighborhood and they would find your unlocked door, because then you're not protecting your family, which is another responsibility. So we can't let go of wisdom, but we also have to be careful that we're not intellectualizing, not caring for others, and using wisdom as an excuse. So
Right.
It's a fine line, and it has to be genuine. But if we truly have our heart open, but we're still maintaining a wisdom and how we operate within that, we're doing okay. But we have to be careful that we're not saying, well, I'm just not going to go help anyone because that's a dangerous neighborhood, and so I could get hurt and not be able to protect my family, and it's just an excuse.
So that would be the answer to some people that say that having a border wall between Mexico and the U.S. is the antithesis or the opposite of loving thy neighbor, because they're needy and they want to come over here for work and things like that. The wisdom is that we have to have a secure border. We have to have a sovereign quality to our nation. We have to have security. We have to know who's here. We have to know who's in our house. So that wisdom, that knowledge of knowing that we're safe, knowing that we have sovereign borders, that would be the answer to those people that say that having that border would be anti loving thy neighbor.
Right. Those who just say, no wall, leave it wide open because that's loving your neighbor. That's operating with no wisdom whatsoever. And as we've commented in past episodes, ignores things in the Bible like Jerusalem having a wall around it. But to love your neighbor is you don't just put that wall up and then say, that's you, we're here, take care of yourself. You create a way for those to come through who do need help to come through. And you continue to go there as you're able to help those people. So it's a balance. Yeah. It's nuanced.
And we're also seeing another argument for loving thy neighbor with a lot of these liberal prosecutors that are not offering jail time or any type of real punishment for people that are doing crimes that are less than murder, sexual assault, etc. We're seeing a lot of people that are released on very low bail in major cities because these liberal prosecutors. And I think that the argument for them is loving thy neighbor, getting them help instead of incarceration, which they view worsens their problems and worsens their tendency towards drugs and violence. So I think that's another argument that I think the left makes sometimes as far as loving thy neighbor. We need to forget about their infractions against the general public, which I think the wisdom argument would say that, okay, these people are committing infractions against the general public that makes us less safe. Therefore, wisdom would suggest we do still give them punishment. We do incarcerate people for crimes of, felony crimes.
Yeah, it's a concept or a verse or an idea that can be easily misused or used to manipulate if not exercised properly. So we do have to be careful about that. Others who are misusing it, and just as we try to decide amongst ourselves how to help this person or how far we go in loving our neighbor as ourself. Again, don't just let anyone into your home that you don't know that could hurt your children. Right. Be sure you're still operating with wisdom.
Right. I mean, there's got to be, it has to make sense, and so utilizing that, King Solomon said, if you pray for wisdom, King Solomon said that if you pray for wisdom, you'll get it.
Well, King Solomon was the wisest man, we're told. King Solomon prayed for wisdom. Right. And when God said he could have anything, wisdom is what he asked for. Right. And then so much more came with that wisdom. Riches and power, that the things he could have just straight asked for actually came as a result of wisdom. But you can pray for wisdom and intelligence and pray that the Lord, blesses you with divine wisdom or spiritual discernment and insight.
And I think if we have those, then we can better answer these manipulations from the left that we need to dumb down our defenses. In other words, for this kind of manipulation of that verse in the Bible that says, love thy neighbor. Speaking of the opposite of loving thy neighbor or anti-loving thy neighbor, we have a quote here from Chamath Palihapitiya, the part owner of the, don't even try to read it. It's
CP. We'll call it CP.
Child porn. Not child porn, CP, referring to Chamath. Well, sorry, we'll edit that out.
I don't mean to get on a tangent here, but is CP a known abbreviation for child porn? Because you went there very quick, and I have never made that connection.
I'm a forensic psychologist, so CP to me means something very specific. The Communist Peoples of China, CP. So So yeah, we have a quote here from the NBA part owner of the Golden State Warriors this week, who saw fit to not love his neighbors. Here's the quote.
Nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really care, and I think it's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very hard... Wait, you're saying you virtually don't care? I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth, okay? Of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line. Okay? Of all the things that I care about, it is below my line. Disappointing.
He's so stone-faced and certain. Nobody cares about the Uyghurs, without a doubt.
The rest, then he says,
speaks for the world.
And then his co-host, this is his own podcast, by the way. It's called the All In Podcast with CP. His co-host says, what? And
then he's looking up. The one guy has the camera straight on him, and but the other guy's camera must be on the roof because he's what?
and then CP says, well, the rest of us don't care. And he makes the argument that there's so many other things in the world to worry about than these little Uyghurs in China. There's a bunch of them actually. There's like
that is below my line. Below my line.
It's below CP's line for sure. Which
I think the only thing above CP's line is CP. I think everything else is below his line.
And as Christians, we're supposed to love CP, not child porn, chamath, papalatapia. We're supposed to love CP. And, but I mean, it's kind of hard to say that he reciprocates those Christian teachings. I think he's obviously an elite. He's a billionaire. He's a tech billionaire. He's a part owner of the Golden State Warriors, probably one of the most woke basketball teams in the NBA. But even his statement was condemned by Steve Kerr and the Warriors themselves, because they know that they can't say the quiet part out loud. But of course, the NBA doesn't care about the Uyghurs. They care about green. They care about money. They care about all that money that they're making in China. China's obsessed with basketball. Not only are they obsessed with marginalizing the Uyghurs, they're obsessed with basketball. Their people just love basketball, so they love the NBA. The NBA makes a lot of money in China, and China is very critical when, or very vengeful when somebody is critical of them. If you mention anything about the abuse of the Uyghurs, if you mention anything about Tibetan freedom, if you mention anything about Hong Kong freedom, if you mention anything about Taiwan being a sovereign state, they will do everything they can to marginalize you or go after your money source, which is them. They have a lot. They print a lot of money. They're not as, I think they just print a lot of money. So, and money talks around this world. It's one of the most, when you think of outside forces that impact any type of situation that you're dealing with in life, money is the biggest outside force.
Yeah. And so there's been a lot of pressure on a lot of NBA players and owners just to not say anything negative about China whatsoever. Yeah. Because of that money source. And I used to be a big basketball fan. And if it was clean and pure now, I probably still would be, but it's gotten to where first you've got all this stuff with China and they're not willing to speak against it. And then you've got BLM posted all over everything. And I'm not a communist. Right. So the fact that I'm not a communist,
at least you don't identify as a communist.
Right, the fact that I hate communism and don't agree with everything China's doing. The NBA's just gotten so political. What? And on the wrong side of politics that the NBA is just below my line right now. They're below my line.
Essentially, right? I mean, they are for me too. They jumped the shark for me. I mean, I'll still watch football. I mean, I kind of got a little bit annoyed with Colin Kaepernick and that whole thing, and then players kneeling for the anthem, which I think is definitely something we should respect, and we should never disrespect the flag. We should never disrespect our fallen soldiers or soldiers in general that have fought for our freedoms. And that's just got to be a solid American value that we uphold. But yeah,
now they're playing the Black national anthem, which when you put another anthem alongside of the national anthem,
it's so hard.
It says that this country's not for everybody. We're two different countries. So that's a bad thing. So football is another hard one to get behind. And I know there's good conservative people with a head on their shoulders in both sports. And I'm sorry, I can't give them my patronage, but overall they've just been so tainted.
Oh man,
that
I've never been so, I've never felt like, that the things that I grew up with and love are so under attack than they are now, which really kind of, so the spiritual warfare is pretty thick this past, I would say 5 to 10 years. We've had, I just remember like just the zeitgeist or the change and tides that we kind of felt with the advent of Prop 8 in California and the legalization of same-sex marriage. And then so that passed and we were like, okay, well, we need to love them. And I think Christians and a lot of conservatives were like, well, what's done is done. We love our gay brothers and sisters and we need to love them as neighbors. And, even though we feel that marriage is a sacred, vow to God between a man and a wife. Why not let them at least have their rights and their tax breaks and stuff. So we kind of let that go. And then we have this forced, paradigm shift. I think the advent of Barack Obama really kind of was like the Trojan horse that brought in the rest of like this the societal shift towards wokeness and anti-fragility and or the tendency towards intersectionalism and valuing a person's skin color over the content of their character. We just had Martin Luther King's birthday. I've never prayed for the man as much as I did this last Monday when, we're faced with this era, this paradigm shift where we're starting to value someone's identity, their sexual identity, their gender, their race, their ethnicity more so than the content of their character. And I could just see, Dr. King in heaven, he's, in heaven, you don't have any gripes or concerns because you know what the real deal is, but you got to think that he's kind of, man, you got to think he's saying to himself, like, man, you guys got it all wrong.
Yeah. They hijacked the message and took it the wrong direction. But
yeah,
that's the big thing about this loving your neighbor is our neighbors are going to be different from us. And we love people despite, the differences.
Yeah.
And, Jesus told the parable of the man that was injured and on the side of the road and needed help. And several Israelites walked past the man and didn't do anything. But then a Samaritan comes by and helps the man. And Jesus says, I ask you, which one of these was his neighbor? And even though the Israelites considered the Samaritans to be the other, the true one exercising love your neighbor as yourself was the one who was going past that otherness and helping the man who needed help. And that's where this with the Uyghurs comes in. Not many of us can I identify much with the Uyghurs beyond common humanity. Culturally, right. They are Chinese in the sense that they live in China.
Yeah.
Ethnic or religiously, they are a Muslim people.
Right.
And they're on the opposite side of the world. So they are very much the other. But if we are loving our neighbor as ourself, as the Good Samaritan did, we will care about the Uyghurs, even though they're in a totally different part of the world and they're a different people. Now, that doesn't mean with wisdom, we don't just sell our home, take our nuclear family, fly into China and try to free the Uyghurs on our own. And that's where you could get the verse wrong and say, well, if you were really loving them as yourself, you would drop everything and do that. We still have to be wise in how we address this situation.
It could be fun.
But we should care about the situation. We shouldn't just say, oh, nobody cares about the Uyghurs.
Yeah.
As CP says.
Yeah, I've never met a Uyghur. I don't think I've ever met a Uyghur, a Chinese Uyghur person. I don't really have much to go on what they're like, who they are, but I know that they're human beings. They're God's children, and we need to love them the same way that we love the people in our orbit, the people that live next to us, as much as I love Mateo. And I think we do as Christians. We know that, and inherently we have this love for people. We're created in His image. I mean, all the Uyghurs are created in His image as well. So there are brothers and sisters. They may not be believers in Christ. But hey, I mean, if we do our job, maybe one day some of them can come to Christ. I think that what we're seeing, this part of this paradigm shift and this tendency towards marginalizing our brothers and sisters around the world, I think it comes from an elite perspective, or the perspective of the elect. What we've noticed over the past 5 to 10 years, and I think we know it's in our face every day now. I mean, you can see it with the media and how the media are essentially elites now. It used to be that reporters were people that had high school degrees, maybe some college. They'd go work for the newspaper. Reporters just go out and they get sound bites from people. They ask questions of politicians. They get a perspective on the street. Now, and you could tell in the product, but our reporters come from the upper crest of society. They come from Harvard, Princeton, Yale,
the Vanderbilts,
the powerful purse strings of the world. These are our elite. And they're our journalists now, and they're not doing their job. They're not calling balls and strikes anymore. They've become advocacy journalists. They're activists. They have a message to push. They've become part of the story, which is something that reporters always valued, was to stay out of the story and just to report the story. Now that we have elites controlling the media is done. That's why Mateo and I thought that this podcast would be useful to Christians, is because I think Christians have to go somewhere to talk about the things that are important to us and to our values, especially American values as American Christians, or Christian Americans, I should say. But yeah, so we're seeing this current of control, and the elites that run our major corporations now. They run our media. They run the tech world, and so it's almost like this it's almost like this conspiracy or cabal of groupthink. These people that are getting into these groupthink situations where they think that they know better than us. They think they can make decisions for us because essentially we're deplorable. We lack capacity compared to them. We're not as, we lack they view their privilege as inherent or owed to them. And it's if you read J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, or you talk to people like Ted Cruz, they'll tell you that that once you get into these schools, you're part of the elite. That's why you go to those schools, so you could network and become elite status. I mean, J.D. Vance talks about it in his book Hillbilly Elegy, that he came from poor West Virginia, Ohio, Southern Ohio, and once he got into the school, then he left that life forever, and will never have to go back necessarily. But he's for all intents and purposes still a good guy, and seems he's going to run for office and probably be a good senator for Ohio. But he'll tell you that he was gifted elite status because he matriculated through Yale and went to Yale Law School or whatever, or Harvard Law School or whatever. And I think that's what we're dealing with in our journalism, and it's corrupting our journalism. It's corrupting our academies too. If you're a college professor at the University of Florida, you probably came from one of those upper crest colleges. I mean, you can't become a professor at a regular college anymore unless you're from Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. They're pushing out the talent that was more local, or the local professors that were homegrown. Now they're all from Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, because that's what they strive for. University of Florida specifically has become very prestigious, and it's largely because they're playing the game, getting these more higher upper crust professors in. Jordan Peterson just resigned this past week from his tenure position at Toronto because and he pretty much labeled the industry as kind of a stunningly corrupt organization or system, and
he just didn't want to be a part of it anymore.
Yeah, I mean he's one of those straight shooters. He's an honest broker. I think he's a pure psychologist, and that he cares for the people that he's around, and that he advises, and that he speaks to. And he does not want to see his organization. He doesn't want to be a part of an organization that's corrupted, and he doesn't want to see a further corruption of our society, our media, and our politics.
Well, whenever you truly start to believe that you're on a higher level than someone else for one reason or another, it becomes harder to truly love that person as yourself, because if you believe you are truly on a higher level, or when you do reach out to love that person, you can potentially still try to help and love that person, but it will be a condescending and patronizing love and help, and not helping a true equal. It's one thing to know that you are in a higher income or tax bracket than this person, but truly believe they hold as much or more value in the eyes of God than you, or to say, I have a higher degree than this person, but they truly hold as much value as me, and that means nothing. I mean, when you truly believe that, or whatever scenario you want to put, that's when you truly are loving that person and helping them. But you have to be careful against anything, whether it's in our personal lives that we start thinking we're better than others, or these honest to God elites that truly believe they are better than the flyover states or the Cretans of the world that hold a lower status.
Amen. Yeah, we have to fight those urges within us. I mean, we're sinful. I think that's part of our sin nature, is to develop a lot of egotistical views of the world, views of our community. Our ego can get in the way a lot as individuals. From the psychological perspective, I mean, the ego is a very strong force in our lives. Narcissism is a spectrum. You have people that meet the criteria for narcissism. You have people that love them, and then you have people that are extremely humble and or even worse than that, possibly depressed and hopeless about the view of their self and things like that. I think when it comes to the elite and the problems that they are perpetrating upon our society, I think we're dealing with a lot of sociopathy. We're dealing with a lot of narcissism, and it's unfortunate. But it's basically sin. We're dealing with sin, and we have to have the wisdom of that serpent and understand that we can't go that far we can't go that far in our lives. We can't inflate our own sense of worth and egos to the point where we marginalize others, and especially to the point where we, like this CP guy, just write off an entire section of people or culture of people, ethnicity that these Muslim Uyghurs are. They deserve our love, and they deserve protection and comfort, and hopefully, the ability to come to Christ one day.
Well, speaking of Christ, it's important to remember in this that Jesus Christ was better than us. He was holy and he was perfect, and we were and are sinners. But Jesus Christ didn't just come to the earth the first time in all of his spiritual heavenly power and just lord over us our failure and help us from that high position. He became flesh, and he emptied himself of the divine attributes. And while he was still fully God, he became fully flesh. And not only that, but allowed himself to be born in a manger, to live in the poorest part of Israel, Nazareth, and to take a humble position, and then to allow sinful men to spit in his face, punch his face, nail him to a cross. I mean, you know the story, but he did not have to go through any of that, and he lowered himself out of love for us. It was the ultimate expression of loving the other as yourself, that he put himself in our sinful shoes and became sin for us in his love for us. And there was no elite status at that point in time. He came to bottom rung, and we have to love others with that same love as best we can in our fallen state, but through the the gifts and fruits that we get from the Holy Spirit after we've
Amen.
accepted Jesus Christ to help us to love others that way.
Amen. I mean, you've seen Passion of the Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you like me? And the whole time, those scenes where he's just being pummeled and just being there's no word for what they did to him. But were you thinking like me? Because I'm born and raised with all these action hero films where Charles Bronson gets revenge on the bad guys, Arnold Schwarzenegger, just destroys his opponents. I'm thinking like, okay, God, come on, just smite this guy. He deserves it. Reduce him to a pile of ash. I
totally hear you. I think the same thing, and that's what's so amazing is that he was able to
he had
show
that
such restraint. Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing.
Yes.
I mean, it's only God. Right?
I always have to ask God,
because if it were one of us, we would like turn those dudes into like goats or something.
I have to ask God for his forgiveness for what I call the sons of thunder spirit. And that's when James and John asked Jesus to just basically like rain down fire on a community that was just rejecting Christ. And he said, oh, don't ask for that. You don't know what spirit you're of when you ask for that. But when I see...
That's a profound statement.
Yeah, when I see like this guy on the news that goes in and just murders a girl who's doing her shift at the... if I'm being honest, I don't not only feel sorry for the girl, but think, oh, this poor lost soul is going to go to hell who killed her. I'm like, justice,
I'm the kid that when I was a kid, I used to ask God to make me into a superhero so I can go beat up bad guys and stuff like that. I was like, cause I could do that, but it's like, it's not in the plan, son. But, God, the way God came to earth or, joined this human experience was, only God. Brilliant. I mean, he came as a baby, so he eased his way into life. Right. So, so in other words, he grew, just naturally into becoming a man and having all of the earthly, limitations, that we have here, gravity, heat, hunger, pain, all those things instead of just like beaming himself into a body, like, Terminator style, like, just like, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. Arnold is like, he comes into like, into a gas station or something and like, give me your clothes. But like you kind of wonder if that would have happened, he'd be like, ew, this is this meat suit, but no, he came as a baby. So he grew into it gradually.
And not only that, but he comes to an area that's under the control of Rome and being ruled by Caesar. And the whole reason he's being born in a manger is Caesar, who's the ruler of the known world at that time, is doing a census to know what his power is and who he can tax and whatnot. And he just...
That's why Bethlehem.
He lets Caesar hold that arrogant power as he's just a nobody in a subjugated section of Rome, yet this is the God of all creation.
Yeah.
So
because that's why they had to go to Bethlehem, to the manger in the first place, is because they were doing a census. So like they had to go back to their hometown.
So Caesar's on his high horse, his stool, looking at the size of his kingdom and in all his arrogance with no idea that somewhere within that kingdom, the God of all creation who created Caesar is coming to turn the world on its head.
Right. I guess that's the thing we need to fall back on. It's like this Chamath Papalatapalia. He doesn't know what he's missing. He obviously doesn't have Christ, or at least, I mean, I can't speak for the man. Maybe he does. And maybe he made a mistake. Maybe he sinned and needs to atone for that sin. But, one day this will all be meaningless. We'll be with Christ in heaven and probably won't see people like Caesar. And, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what was in his heart, but he was definitely not a Christ follower at the time. So, but yeah, I mean, so that's the whole point of this. I mean, we can't lose sight of the main point of, trusting and believing in Jesus and just getting it done.
And as the world becomes more and more cold and insensitive to their neighbor, as is highlighted in this clip we showed, it's going to get worse and worse as we are in the end times and go into the end times. We're told that men's hearts are going to get harder and harder and colder. So you're going to have to work harder and harder to protect your heart and spirit, to not just go along with the calcification going on all around us.
That's a perfect example. I mean, what a hard statement. It's below my line. Mm-hmm. That's about as harsh and hard as it gets. So we're in that time. In other words, I mean,
you just have to turn on your news and look around. There have been bad things and genocides for all of history, but things are pretty bad. And if you can't see that right now, that men's hearts are getting just about as cold and hard as they've ever been, you need to wake up a little bit. And again, just be careful that your heart doesn't follow that trend and that you continue to love your neighbor as yourself, even when all the messaging you're going to get is that it's about you and why this person and that person are bad and not worthy of love.
Amen. I love you, Mateo.
I love you.
What? All right, guys. Signing off is the Christian guys. We'll see you again soon. We love you guys as well, our neighbors. Stay tuned.
For exclusive content and bonus footage, please subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/3fcommunity. That's patreon.com/3fcommunity. We'd love to have you join the family.